Yeah.
Okay, so fine, it's recording.
I can
Okay,
see
so I can
red
pause
button.
and stop it. So shall I pause it now and restart it when we're ready to go?
Yeah, brilliant.
Okay, so apparently we're good to go. So I just need to ask you to enable me to share my screen. Okay, sorry, I'm just getting everything ready again. Have you done that now, Sue? There we go. Okay, share. Okay, so I'm hoping you can all see my screen. Can I just get a thumbs up if yes? Okay, good. Okay, so my name is Ghitta. I created Rewind Your Mind about 3-4 years ago now. I started off as a therapist, just normal hypnotherapy, psychotherapy, cognitive behavior therapy, etc. And whilst working as a therapist, I was also working part-time in the corporate world, a little bit in events, in sales, in construction. So I've been in different areas. And I just started doing freebie stress management sessions with the skills that I had and realized, oh, people are actually loving it. And then I started doing hypnosis sessions, which you can't really call hypnosis in the corporate office. So we called it deep relaxation sessions. And I was fully booked with 30 to 50 people every lunchtime pretty much. And people just loved it. So eventually I went through a wobble myself, a really stressful time, and I decided I'm going to leave my last job. And I wasn't quite sure what I want to do with you know, everything afterwards. Should I go back to a corporate job, or should I just, you know, be a therapist? And my husband said, oh, well, why don't you use all your skills doing what you're doing and just do it with corporate clients? And I thought, actually, I haven't thought about it. So I started working with corporate clients, mainly the construction industry, but anything from cheese factories to accountants, law firms, real estate, etc. And yeah, totally love it. But now I'm stuck at home and I have to do things online, which is fine. I just can't be as interactive with my sessions as I'd like to be. So that was just a quick introduction. And we're going to talk about stress. Why is that not clicking on? Let me see. There we go. Okay, so stress. And if I do look away, sorry, I have made a few notes just to remind myself, because it's a lot of information to remember, and I want to make sure I give you all the detail that I possibly can. So we all obviously know what the effects are, what it does to us, what it feels like. So I'm not going to bore you with that. But stress obviously is sort of an occupational health hazard. It causes physical symptoms in our body. Sometimes we can't control these physical symptoms, and sometimes we don't even relate it to stress or anxiety. And it causes relationships to deteriorate, which I'll talk about as we carry on. Now, I'm going to move just so I can see you guys a little bit as well, because I feel like I don't see anyone now. Okay. Right. We have two different types of stress. Acute stress, which is sort of that instant wham, like, where's my phone? Oh, okay, I got it. Or you arrive at the airport and where's my passport? And you're panicking for that moment until you find your passport and you're like, okay, I can breathe, I can relax. It's done now. And then we have chronic stress, which is just constant. Now, normally I have a volunteer doing this for me, and now I'm just going to use all of you as a volunteer if you're available. Do you have a glass of water in front of you by any chance? Okay, perfect. So pick up that glass of water if you have one, or something that's heavy-ish. Now I'd like you to extend your arm. Mine doesn't come up properly on my screen. There we go. Now hold that glass of water for me. Now I want you to keep holding it and see what that feels like. Where do you feel everything in your arm? And obviously that will start to begin feeling heavier. Now if you want, you're welcome to unmute your things if you want to ask me any questions, just so I can interact with you as well. But the feelings we get, obviously, is getting heavier, it's getting painful. If you can't hold it anymore, you're welcome to put it down. You get to a point where it's just too much. I want to swap hands, or actually I can do a little bit longer and push myself that little bit more. Now the question is, has the water changed? Has it become any heavier? And the answer is really no. You know, the water stays the same, the glass stays the same, but it is long and prolonged. Nothing's really changed for us, but because we're holding it constantly, it's long, prolonged, without that opportunity to relax. If you can put it down a little bit, take a sip of water, have a bit of a breather, and then do it again, you'll probably be able to hold it for a little while longer. But constantly holding it without that break in between is exactly what chronic stress is doing to us. We just don't get that break, which is what we really need. Now, the first thing we need to do is identify our stressors. Lots of people don't actually do this, and this is the first thing I teach all my clients. If you're stressed, identify the stress. And they'll say to me, oh yeah, so work pressure is a little bit more this week, and this is a little bit more, and that and that and that, but nothing I can't handle. I do this all the time, but all of a sudden it's just too much for me. But they don't really look at all the different types of stresses that is adding on constantly, building up this glass of water that you're holding. So we've got physiological stress. Now this is trauma, and when I say trauma, it could even be a traumatic event, maybe a car accident when you were, I don't know, 17 years old or something, you know, years and years ago. And every now and then, your mind will trigger a similar scenario. Maybe you were in a near-miss accident with a car, or maybe you saw an accident, or just something, even on TV, that triggered that traumatic event. You've never dealt with it in your life. You're still carrying that stress with you. Intense physical labor. Now, I'm guessing none of you ladies are intensely working really hard and picking up stuff, but when I work with my construction workers, that's what they do all the time. Environmental pollution, illness, fatigue, oxygen supply, excuse me, even your hormones can cause stress on your body, dietary stress. It's so important to know what you're eating and that you're eating the right stuff. I recently did a genetic test for something, just something really interesting I had to do. And I realized through the genetic test that my body can't absorb any vitamin Bs, as in nothing. I was born without the gene to help me absorb it. And I thought I was eating really healthy food, but due to all sorts of symptoms and things, it led me to do this test. And I realized, oh gosh, I now need to eat a lot of extra stuff and take extra supplements, a lot more than the average person, for me to really take in. And anything I swallow that's generic just flushes out of my system. My body can't absorb it. So all of that was putting stress on my body without me realizing it. Dehydration. How often do we drink this glass of water? How many of them do we drink? You know, sometimes we just forget. And substance abuse, I'm not talking about drugs and alcohol necessarily. It could just be drinking tons of coffee or tons of Red Bull just to stay awake and keep you going. These are all stress on your body. And if you can start identifying this, you can already start making small changes, but in the long run, it will make a big change. Now, these things are easy to change. It's the next ones that's not so easy. So we've got psychological stress. This is your emotional stress, resentment, fears, anger, frustration, grief. And especially now, the last few months with the pandemic, there's a lot of stuff happening for us. There's a lot of emotions that we've been carrying. Cognitive stress, information overload. Can you imagine all the information we've heard and had to deal with in the last few months? There's just been so much adding on to our already stressful lives. Worry, guilt, shame, anxiety, panic, even being a perfectionist adds stress to your body. And then perceptual stress, our beliefs, our stories, our attitudes, you know, the core beliefs that we have grown up with and things we keep telling ourselves, which are not always necessarily true, but we believe it based on our past experiences. Next up, I'm just going to move that. So we've got psychosocial stress. Now, definitely something you can't always help, but you can do stuff towards it. So relationship and marriage difficulties. Literally in the last 4 months, in the last 3 months, I've had 4 of my close friends telling me they're going to divorce. And I'm not talking about 4 people, I'm talking about 4 couples. They just couldn't survive the whole lockdown. And I think 4 is quite a lot just in my little group of friends, you know. Lack of social support, loss of employment, and loss of savings. And these things all happen to most of us now. Some would have lost their jobs, some would have had to live on their savings to survive while they're not getting their normal income. Loss of a loved one. Some of us could have lost someone during this horrible time, you know. Bankruptcy, home foreclosure, isolation, definitely isolation. How many of us were isolated completely on our own? So all of these are adding, and it's so important for you to identify exactly where, oh, what am I doing? Where your stress is coming from. Okay, so looking at the stress symptoms, there's quite a few different symptoms, and I'm not sure which ones you guys are struggling with, but acne, and this is quite shocking. People who are really stressed tend to touch their faces more. For some reason, it's like, oh, I can't deal with it. Oh, it's too much. Oh, what's happened? And they constantly touch their faces. And I sometimes walk, especially on the construction sites, I walk around and I can just see the acne. Because when I work with them, I work with them for 3 months, you know, and I'm there on a weekly basis. So I'll walk in, and the people I see on a regular basis, I'm like, oh, you're stressed, you're stressed, you're stressed. I can just see the breakout on their faces. And of course, now with COVID, we shouldn't really be touching our faces. And now I'm telling you, but when you're stressed, you actually touch your face more. So there will be hormonal shifts in your body when you're stressed. You'll have excess oil and pollution, and all of that will clog your pores. Headaches is a very common one. It's basically the second most common trigger for that people get from stress. Obviously, again, there's other triggers as well, but stress is very, very prevalent with headaches. Chronic pain. When you are stressed, your entire body tenses up, and I'll talk about that in a little bit further on, and it just explaining how it works. But it's no wonder people then start having chronic pain, and they don't always attribute it to the stress in their lives and the constant stress that they've got. Frequent sickness. Again, not something we need right now. When you're too stressed, your immune system will weaken, and COVID, we need a strong immune system. Decreased energy and insomnia. If you think about going to bed at night, trying to fall asleep, you've got all these worries running through your mind, so you can't actually sleep properly. You wake up in the morning, you're already tired, you're trying to work, concentrate, and you can't focus, so your energy depletes a lot more. Next up is changes in libido. You know, you're just not up for it when you're so stressed. Digestive issues, so this could be bloating, diarrhea, constipation, and this is why they also say with IBS patients, irritable bowel syndrome, it's mainly due to stress. Your body just tightens and tenses up completely. Appetite changes. So again, some people will completely overeat, ravenously, even midnight snacks when they're stressed. I go for sweets. It's really bad, but sweets and chocolates is my go-to when I'm stressed. And some people stop eating completely. And you're actually shocked the next time you see them, because you can see this massive weight loss that they've had. Depression. Now, depression is not really brought on by stress, but it's a lot more prevalent. When you're already stressed, depression will creep up very quickly. Rapid heartbeat. So again, your heartbeat goes faster, your blood pressure will go up. That intensifies everything. But interestingly, they actually did say if you listen to relaxing music while doing a really stressful task, your heartbeat will actually lower again, and your blood pressure wouldn't go that high. Now the next one's probably going to be blocked. So let me see if I can move this again. Oh, looks like I can. Great. And sweating. We tend to sweat more. Now, if you look at primitive age, when we had to fight a lion or a tiger and we go in that fight or flight mode, all the blood rushes to your arms and your legs so you can fight or run away from this tiger or lion or whatever it is. But as a coping mechanism to prevent all these big muscles to overheat, your body starts sweating tremendously to cool those muscles down. So again, when you're stressed, you'll sweat a lot more. And that might just be under your arms, it might be your back, the top of your lip, it might be your entire body. So I don't know how many of these you guys are suffering from at the moment, but there's a nice list. And I thought I'll throw in a little bit of a stress test. So it'd be interesting to know what you think of this afterwards. So I'm going to throw out a few questions. I think there's 14 of them. And I'd like you to tally up, like I've mentioned there. 1 is for seldom or never. 2 is sometimes, 3 always, and often, and 4 is always. And I'll give you some time just to complete this. So I have problems falling asleep or staying asleep. I am uptight and cannot seem to relax. I get angry if things do not go my way. I have difficulty concentrating. I have a hard time finding fun things to do. I feel tired during the day. I worry a lot about things going on in my life. I have had health problems because I work too hard. I use alcohol, cigarettes, caffeine, or drugs to cope with stress. I laugh or smile less than I used to. I feel sad or disappointed often. I like to be in control. I don't have enough time for all the things in my life. And I think the last one, I have a habit of clenching my fists, cracking my knuckles, twirling my hair, or tapping my fingers. Now, if you want to unmute yourself and give me some feedback, it'd be interesting to know. So I'll give you a little bit of a breakdown of this. So let me just see. Anyone that's got under 20? No? You can put your hand up if you want as well. 21 to 30 in total. Well, have you had time to count it up? Sorry, I went really quickly there. You got 21 to 30, okay.
Yes, me.
Okay, good, Nicola, and I think Rachel, and then 31 and up. Okay.
Yeah, that's me.
All right, so we've got two that are medium stressed and 2 that are high stressed. And I'm just wondering if you actually realized that you were on that level.
No.
No? It's shocking, isn't it? But we don't realize it because we think this is normal. This is just our life. We're coping with things. We just carry on and crack on and do our everyday stuff. And we don't really realize how stressed we get. And at some point, it's a cherry on the top and everything boils over. You were going to say, Nicola?
I was just going to say, I think overall I'm probably less stressed working at home than going into the office because I don't know how I did my work. I'm just about keeping up. And now I don't have business travel. I don't have training. I don't have seminars. I'm not interviewing staff. I don't know how I fitted it all in. But it goes waves more and less depending on time. It changes over week by week. Some periods I'm stressed, there's a lot going on, and other periods there's a little bit less. But certainly one's outlook and emotions affect how you perceive whether you're stressed or not. But I don't know how you control that.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully I'll give you some information with that later on. The thing is also, we might have different stresses now than we have at work. So at work, you're used to your stress and that's just what you deal with every day. Now, all of a sudden, it's completely different stress that you've never had to necessarily deal with on a long-term basis. So we don't always understand quite what's happening in our bodies because we don't realize, we don't sit down and track basically and identify, hang on, this is happening, where's this coming from? Like I said, we just think, oh, this is normal and I've dealt with it before, I can do it again. Which brings me to this. Have you heard of the stress bucket? No, so some shakes and some other shakes. No, no's and yeses. Okay, so the stress bucket, and this is my favorite way of explaining it, and I'm so sorry, normally I actually have a real bucket that I show people, but I left my bucket in one of the previous corporate offices I worked in, and I couldn't find another bucket, so I'm just going to have to explain it to you. Now, we all have a stress bucket. Some people have a bucket the size of a pot plant, and others will have the stress bucket the size of a skip. We just have different sizes, which is why you'll get some people say, yeah, I'll be the CEO of a company. I can handle everything that comes my way, or I'll even be the president because I can handle it and I've got all the support. Other people say, look, I actually just want to sit in the office and just be spoon-fed almost what I need to do, and I don't need to do much. I'll just taper on because that's all I can handle. And there's nothing wrong with either of them. You know what your stress levels are, you know what you can cope with. And then of course some people can cope with serious business stress and other people can cope with serious life stress, but if you swap the two around, they just can't cope with whatever life throws them the other way around. So if you think about the stress bucket now as water tapping into this bucket, the water represents your stress. And the water will start tapping, 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 tapping. And at some point, you're going to have to chuck that water out. We never really get a chance to really throw out all the water. It doesn't happen unless we do a complete reset. Maybe we go on a 6-month holiday and we just have nothing to do. We get massages every day. That's when you can probably empty your entire bucket. But otherwise, most of us will always have a bucket filled with water or stress. And what I've put together is a few examples. Now, obviously, this might not apply to you, but I've tried to think of what would have happened with some people now during the last few months. So imagine as I'm going through this bucket slowly tapping full of water. And I want you to also imagine how big you think your bucket is, you know, so that you know, as I'm going through, where would this be your boiling point if this was your life? So first of all, we get the pandemic news and everyone's like, what? Where did this come from? What's happening in the world? And you're like, some people don't care and some people are already feeling a little bit stressed about it. Now, eventually you have fear of traveling. You don't want to fly. You don't want to take public transport. You're not quite sure if it's safe or what to do. And all of a sudden you are in isolation and lockdown. Now, this brings new stress because how am I going to get to my work? How am I going to finish everything? How are we going to do all these processes? And you panic about it and everything just goes all over the place. You also have fear for yourself and your family. Don't know who's going to catch it. Will I catch it? I don't want my family to have it, so I'll just stay put and not go anywhere. You have business worries. If you have your own business, you know, am I going to make it? If you work for someone, again, what's going to happen to my job? You realize you also have underlying issues. Maybe you have asthma, maybe diabetes, maybe it's something worse. And everyone's saying, uh-oh, COVID, careful if you're a little bit sick, you know. And of course, now, as we look at it, when you're really stressed, it breaks down that immune system, it weakens it even more. So you think, oh gosh, what if I get it? You have information overload and just feeling overwhelmed. Remember at the start when I said there's a list of information overload, basically, that is part of your stress because there's just so much information that your mind is trying to figure out and cope with, and you have no idea what is true and what's not. You have work from home stress. You're cooped up in an office sharing maybe with your husband or your partner. The kids are running all over the place, or you know, maybe some days you have to go and sit in your car outside just to do meetings and be able to hear. I know our neighbors, the husband used to sit in their treehouse every day and work from there, which I thought was quite sweet. And then at 6 o'clock in the evening or 5 o'clock, they'll swap and the wife will come and sit in the treehouse with a glass of wine and the husband goes and look after the kids. So next up, you've got no work-life balance. You don't know when to stop, when to go. You're emailing frantically till 10 o'clock in the morning. You do all sorts of other things. I say 10 o'clock in the morning till 10 o'clock at night. You do all sorts of other things maybe in the morning, and you're not getting to your work. And then all of a sudden you're grabbing work again, and then you're with the kids, and everything is just muddled all over and together. You've got lack of guidance, of communication from your employer, just no idea what's happening, what am I supposed to do. Managers don't have time to look through everything. There's no real systems in place. Then you have burnout, because you're trying to work. You're hearing of all these people losing their jobs, and you definitely don't want to lose yours. So you are constantly pushing yourself to be the best you can be, just so you don't lose your job. Now, the guilt comes. You feel guilty because you're not spending time with your children. You feel guilty because you are spending time with your children. You know, there's no family life balance again. The guilt is just eating you up. And again, guilt was one of the things that causes us internal stress. You have a sedentary lifestyle. No more going to the gym, no more walking down to the station or going here or going there. You're just practically sitting. And if you're not sitting in front of your computer, you're sitting in front of the TV. Some people might begin to exercise, which is great. But if you compare that to going to work and walking around in the office and coming home, that exercise really isn't enough. So again, lack of exercise. Increased use of tobacco or alcohol. You know, it's Friday every day or Saturday every day. It's a weekend. I can just have a glass of wine at 10 o'clock in the morning, put it in my coffee mug and have a meeting, and no one knows, you know. So some people I know of, not me, have done that. You're unable to see your elderly parents, so you're worried about that. You're stressed. I know my parents are in Namibia, which is where I'm from. I haven't seen them in a year and a half. The numbers there are spiking, and I'm worried about them, even if it's just in the back of my mind, but it's constantly there. You try juggling your full-time work, caring for the children, running the house, and it's just getting too much. You know, some people I know have mentioned they're trying to homeschool their kids, and eventually they just gave up. They just can't do it anymore. Everyone wants to Zoom. You've got scheduled Zoom calls with friends, you've got clients, you've got work meetings, and it's just Zoom, and you're constantly sitting in front of the computer. Now, the question so far is, where is your bucket now? If all of this was happening to you, is it halfway? Is it a lot more fuller? Is it already overflowing by now? I don't know. That's something you need to ask yourself. But if all these things were happening, which I'm assuming most of it is happening to most of us, how much can you handle? Now you have signs of depression and anxiety is starting to build up. You know, you're so in isolation, you can't really get out, you miss your friends, you miss your family or your parents. You feel anxious about doing stuff, anxious about going out because you just don't have all the information. Inability to concentrate, you start making mistakes because you're not sleeping properly, you can't focus and concentrate with all these things happening. And now you are fearing job loss. And perhaps being told that you're no longer needed, at least for now. So you're being placed on furlough. Again, just some added stress. Now you have no reason to wake up in the morning. You sleep in till late afternoon. You go to bed in the early morning hours, and your entire routine is out of place, causing stress on your body. You're finding it hard not to have your own space. Everyone is constantly in your face, no matter where you turn. And all of a sudden, this big house that you thought you had now feels really, really, really small. You have relationship difficulties. You argue a lot more. Some of it went on to domestic violence. Sadly enough, this is exactly what happened to a friend of mine, and she's taken her kids and moved out, and she's now in a sanctuary. Never had domestic violence before, but came out with lockdown. So because of your domestic violence, you're now having panic attacks. You're so stressed, you can't breathe, you can't get out, you don't know what to do. Your immune system is weakening, so now you're worried even more about, will I catch the virus, and what about my kids? So you move out of the house with or without your kids, depending on the situation, which is even harder. You've also got scheduled surgery, but they've cancelled everything with the doctors, and you're just really worried, you know, what if this mole is cancerous? What if this thing and this thing and this thing, and everything's just cancelled? It's all too much, and you just can't cope anymore. You might have severe anxiety, severe depression, you might get a heart attack, or even commit suicide. You don't know when this is going to happen, because at the moment, you're just following the motion. You're not stopping to check in on yourself to see, how stressed am I at the moment? Did I notice how stressed I am? It might be different types of stresses that you haven't dealt with before, but it still creeps up. And if you don't have the right support, where will you end up, you know, if you don't get that support? So, any questions before I move on? Nope, all good so far? Okay, so I've got a bit of blue tack here. Can you all see that? Yeah, okay. So blue tack is quite flexible, and you know, you can put it into all sorts of shapes and things. Now, when life is running smoothly, everything is flexible. Everything is so easy to do. You know, life is just flowing. If I were to put this under pressure, let me roll it back up again. So you probably won't see it now on the screen, but if I drop it, it actually bounces back, even though it's really soft, but it's also very hard. So if you think about your life, so the same thing happens with people. When things are easy, we are relaxed actually in our bodies. We can do a lot more, we can move, we're flexible, our lives are flexible and pliable. When we're under stress, everything tenses up and it becomes rock hard, which is when the chronic pain comes in. And you might think the chronic pain is, yes, because I haven't exercised, or yes, it's an old injury, but it's becoming more and more severe because you are tensed up. Now, if you take your fist and squeeze it really, really hard for me, as hard as you can, and just do it for a moment or two. And when I say now, I want you to release your fist and just have a look at your hand and what it looks like. So squeeze it really hard and then release it now. And can you see how it's all patchy and white? And then the blood starts flowing back in. Now, when we are stressed, we're putting all that tension, all of our organs in our body, under tension. Everything is being squeezed together. And when you do that, you're actually stopping blood flow and important nutrients to certain body parts, which then causes your immune system to weaken, and it causes all these aches and pains and things that you're struggling with. And we might not feel like, I don't know, your lungs or your liver or your kidneys or whatever is under stress, but they are, because things are just restricting. I know for me, a telltale sign when I'm stressed is I've got this here in my neck that really, really tightens up. It becomes rock hard. That affects going into my neck. It affects my arm. It affects my lower back. And that is then attached to my hamstrings, and everything is affected. And it's all when I'm really, really stressed and tense, because this is the part for me that tenses up. Who knows what other body parts of me are also tensing up, but this is where I feel it the most. And we all have different parts that will be extremely tense and sore. So when we do things like deep relaxation, or you take a bit of a time out, or you go on holiday, all of that does wonders for the tension in our bodies, but it's actually just adding on to the stress. Because when we come back, our desks are piled up with work and emails and all these things, and you now feel just as tense the moment you walk back into the office after your 2-week-long holiday, because now you have to catch up on all this. And it's just throwing that tension and the stress right back on it. So the key is to have good coping strategies in place, and to have these coping strategies in place on a regular basis. Because if you do it regularly, you won't fill up that bucket as quickly as you'd normally do. Now, going back to the bucket, if you were to imagine just a little tap on the side of the bucket. And when things start piling up, when the water starts boiling in, you just open that bucket slightly and seep out a tiny bit of water, even if it's a couple of droplets, you know, let it seep out, constantly draining, so that your bucket never actually fills up. So when you have good coping strategies in place, it's sort of like putting that little tap on the side of your bucket that's constantly seeping. And people will tell me, oh, but I know some of these coping strategies, and I've heard of this and I've heard of that. Great, but it won't work unless you do it constantly in the long term. And it's really simple, easy processes to do. We just have to continuously do it to really see the benefits. So the key as well is changing our perspective, looking at things from a different point of view. Sometimes we're so stuck that we can't see any other way, which is why we also need support from friends or people, and maybe someone that's not as stuck as us, you know, in a similar situation. But just challenging our thoughts or speaking to someone else and say, how else can I see this? What else? Is there another outcome? Is there another way of looking at it? So I want to show you this photo. What do you see? Is this a guy looking at you or a guy looking to the side? And it's either, really. You can either look straight at it or it's looking to the side. And this is the thing about perspectives. We've got to see it from a different perspective. There's another analogy. If you cross your hands for me like that. Okay. Now, notice which thumb is on top. And then I'd like you to unlock your fingers and swap all of them the other way around. Okay. And what does that feel like? Is it weird? Is it uncomfortable? Is it normal? You know, naturally you would just grab it and that's the only way you always have it. And it just gives you, I guess, that insight again, like to you, this way is normal, but to someone else, the other way is normal. It just feels so foreign if you do it the other way. And you can do the same with folding your arms. This is more difficult. If you fold your arms and then swap it around, I always feel skew when I do that. It's like I've twisted completely. So whenever you're stuck in a situation, or whenever you're like, I don't know, just always think, even when you're angry at someone, you know, just do this little test as a reminder and say, maybe they aren't seeing it the way I'm seeing it. Maybe there is another way around. Let this be your reminder. And this is how we also have to challenge our thoughts, you know. Is this the best way for me? Is there another way I can think about things? Am I being kind to myself thinking about it in this way? Am I being fair to other people, demanding they need to do X, Y, and Z, but maybe they can't see my picture? They've got a different picture in mind. So changing your perception is so important, and your perspective when dealing with stress, because sometimes we just get stuck and this is the way and this is the only way and I can't get out of it, and you're causing yourself more stress, because it's all how we perceive life, how we perceive a situation, how we perceive an experience or a person. And you can make a choice. You can make a situation as good or as bad as you perceive it, right? So moving on, think 15 things you can do today. So I've tried to gather a few things that is easy enough to do, and that you don't have to do all of it in one go, but you can start implementing them, maybe one thing at a time. I don't know if any of you heard of the 4-7-8 breathing technique. Nope, this is my favorite. This is one I teach all the time. It just works. So I'd like you to do this with me. So the idea, I'll first explain it and then you can do it with me. So the idea is you breathe in for 4, you hold it for the mental count of 7, and then you breathe out for the mental count of 8. I say mental count and not seconds because some people get panicky when they breathe too long. So it could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. However you want to count that. And when you breathe out, you take the tip of your tongue and put it behind your front teeth. And you breathe out audibly like this. So the breath comes in between your lips, but through the tongue that's blocking it, basically. Does that make sense? Do you got it? Or I'm trying to see on the video. Okay, so let's do this together. I want you to close your eyes for this and just follow the sound of my breath, because it will really help you just to relax. So when you're ready, taking a nice deep breath in for the mental count of 4. Hold it for the mental count of 7. And when you're ready, you can breathe it out for the mental count of 8. And repeat that again, breathing in for 4. Holding it for 7. Breathing out audibly for 8. And I'm going to stay quiet for a moment or two while you do it 2 more times before coming back. Okay, are we all back again? Sue, are you with us? Can't see that you're moving, so I thought you're still nice and relaxed in your corner. So I'm just wondering, how did that make you feel? Did you feel sleepy? Did you feel relaxed? Did you feel stressed?
I certainly forgot about the things I was thinking about.
Oh, right, great, brilliant. Because you're focusing on counting, that's why.
Yeah.
So basically, this technique was created mainly for people who struggles to fall asleep at night. So if ever you have that problem, just do the 4, 7, 8 breathing and you'll drift off nicely. It's not going to work all the time, sadly so, but it will definitely work loads of times. During this process, they also realize it's fantastic for people with stress, anxiety, or that's really angry. And the idea behind it is because you're involving so many of your senses, you are breathing, you're focusing on what do I need to do with my tongue, where's my lips going to go, you're hearing yourself, you're counting, your different counts, it's not the same thing. So many things that's actually using your senses and distracting you that you forget about what's happening in your mind, which is exactly what Nicola said. You just simply forget about it. And when you're feeling really anxious, really stressed, really angry, step away and go and do this. It doesn't take long. I think it took you less than a minute now to do this. You can just do 4 or 5 rounds, step away from the problem, go and do it, breathe, gather yourself, come back and approach it again. Your breath will always ground you. So we'll just clear your mind so that you can think clearly. Now, I know sometimes we go through a period where we're just like panicking and it's just too much and I don't have time for this and this is not working and this isn't working and everything's going wrong. It's only going wrong because you're not thinking clearly. So you're making mistakes. You're not focusing. You're not there. Step away for 1 minute and go and do this. Even if you think you don't have time, you'll actually have more time if you step away because you're not making all these mistakes. So next up, a daily meditation or relaxation. Insight Timer is one of my favorite apps that you can use. It's absolutely free of charge. There are tons of meditations on there, and you can pick every day. You know, you can do a 5-minute one, 10, 20, 30, 40, 2 hours even if you want to. You decide how long you want your meditation to be. Nicholas, sorry, I think you're still on mute. Unmute.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's fine. I don't mind, but I'm just thinking you can hear the tapping. So I don't know if you guys have heard of something called Morning Miracle. And it's sort of a 7-step process. It's really, really good to follow. You basically get up an hour earlier than normal, which I struggle with because I'm a night owl. And then within that hour, you do all sorts of things. And some of these I'll mention now, but it's like gratitude, it's doing a meditation, it's doing your workout, it's doing all sorts, because you're basically setting yourself up in the morning already to start a good day. If you don't set yourself up properly, also, it's like getting up with the wrong, on the wrong side of the bed, right? You haven't set yourself up properly, and then your whole day goes wrong. And mainly because your mind isn't in it. You're thinking about a million other things. You're stressing about all sorts of things, which is why we have a bad day, because we just mess up as we go along, or, you know, situations happen to us and we're not able to cope with it that day, or we perceive it wrong because of something. You know, maybe you're just irritated, maybe you didn't sleep well, maybe you dreamt about something and now it's affecting your day. So if you can do a daily meditation, even if it's just for 5 minutes, preferably early morning, but it can be 10 times a day if you want to. It can really be any time. It just helps you take that time out that you so deserve. Cultivate a gratitude mindset. Now, question to you, and again, please unmute if you're happy to. How many thoughts do you think we have a day?
Thousands and thousands.
How many would you say, Rachel?
I don't know. Probably 50,000. Something ridiculous like 50,000, because everything in your mind just goes.
Yeah. Any other guesses?
I was going to say only 1,000, but no doubt I'm wrong.
Okay. So, Teresa, have you got ideas of how many you think we've got?
No, but it's probably loads and loads and loads.
Yeah, I wouldn't have said as many as 50,000, but maybe a couple of thousand.
Okay, right. So you're all wrong, although Rachel's the closest. Look at that. So we've got between 65,000 and 85,000 a day.
Wow.
It's insane, isn't it? I know. And of that amount, only 3%, which is about 12,000 thoughts, are positive. Only 3%. That's really not a lot. So you can imagine with 85,000 thoughts, what is going through your mind, and no wonder you are believing things that's not there. No wonder you're making stories up as you go. No wonder you're perceiving things in a bad light, and no wonder you're being critical to yourself and all sorts of other things, because you're just filled with negative thoughts, and our minds are negatively biased. It will always veer towards the negativity rather than the positivity. So we've got to cultivate a positive mindset, and the way to do it is to have gratitude. I'll give you an example. When I work with my depressive clients and I ask them to think of, I don't know, 10 things that they're really grateful for. Actually, let me do this example with you now. Unmute yourself, and I want you to give me 10 things that you are grateful for right now.
Having a garden.
Good.
Not having to commute.
It's a
I was going to say that.
It's the weekend.
Having
Yes,
a weekend. Yeah.
Having more time at home.
Daughter back at school.
Okay.
No, she's 17. It's fine. It's just, you know, so she's self-sufficient, but even still, I'm just glad she's back at school.
Yeah. Anything else?
Having a partner at home.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Go on. We haven't reached 10 yet.
Well, having a nice house, having a nice car, you know, being able to go out and garden.
Yeah. Gratitude. You know that I know, Teresa, that you have, but I've not had the virus, and gratitude for that, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yes,
Relatively helped.
exactly. So I'm just going to close my door quickly because I see my partner's coming home. So between the 1, 2, 3, 4 of you, I had to count you now, between the 4 of you, it didn't just come like that, like you're just naming it. There were a bit of silent bits in between, and we eventually got to 10. If I ask my depressive clients for 10 things they're grateful for, they mostly literally can't think of 3 things. I would say to them, oh, how about being alive? No, really don't want that anymore. Okay. How about your parents? No, hate them. How about a puppy? No, I don't have one, don't want one, whatever. There's nothing that excites them. There's nothing they get excited about or happy about or thankful for, you know. It's so difficult, and I have to literally drag it out of them to come up with just 10 things that they're grateful for. And then on the other hand, I have a friend who's had cancer for the last 4 years, and I think she's the most positive person in the entire world. She has to go in on a monthly basis to the hospital. They literally switch off her body, basically. They untap all of her blood. They filter it through a machine and then pump her back in again within seconds and switch it back on again. She has to do this every month for the last 4 years. In the meantime, her husband couldn't deal with the cancer, so he divorced her. She had to freeze her eggs because, you know, you can't do chemo and all sorts of other things. And now she's 42, and doesn't have a husband or a boyfriend, so I'm not sure if she'll ever have a child. But none of this have deterred her. She is the most positive person I've ever met. She will send photos of us. Look at me, I'm in the hospital again, and such a nice day coming here. The sun was shining and this happened and that happened. I'm like, oh my goodness, you are in hospital and you are making me feel ashamed for, you know, whatever. But she's decided to cultivate that mindset. She wants to be positive. And then you have other cancer patients that just give up. And if the doctor says you've got 6 months to live, then maybe they do, because I'm not saying that's always the case, but they just give up maybe because their mindset isn't there. They've told her she's got 5 years to live. She's 4 years in and she's now in remission, which is fantastic. So you've got to cultivate that gratitude mindset every day. Write down, if you can, 7 things that you are grateful for. Sometimes it can be really hard getting to those 7 things, but just whatever pops up in your mind. And even if you write down the same thing every single day, just do it anyway. And if you think about it, after a hard day, a stressful day, when we go to bed at night, our minds basically tries to work through everything that's happened for us during that day. Now, if you go to bed at night and write down a few things that you're grateful for, then I bet that's what your mind's going to focus on when you sleep, instead of all these worries and things. Next up is take a break, the 90-minute cycle. Now, I have made a lot of notes, so I'm going to refer to this now. We all have that afternoon slump, you know, around 2 o'clock, and you're just like, oh, when is it the end of the day? I have no energy. I need a cup of coffee. I just, you know, you've just got the slump, especially when we worked in the office store. Now, I'm not sure if you still feel it as much. My slump comes in around 4 o'clock normally for some bizarre reason. But yeah, most of the time people have theirs straight after lunch. So I don't know if you've heard of the ultradian rhythm and the circadian rhythm, but we've got the circadian rhythm that runs on a 24-hour cycle, and it's on a 90-minute cycle. Let me open this up for you. So we've got 90 minutes. Now what they're saying is your 90-minute sleep cycle also equals your 90-minute cycle during the day. So you have 90 minutes where your brain is functioning on high alert, and then you have 20 minutes where your brain needs to recuperate. It needs to recharge. I'm making us sound like robots, but basically that is almost it. You know, you need that 20 minutes to recharge. Our brain takes up literally 20% of our body's fuel. So if you don't give it that recharge, a lot more will happen. So my question is, what do you think will happen if you push through those 20 minutes and you don't take a break? What's going to happen?
Will you
Less
perform,
productive.
perform less well?
Yeah. Anything else?
Lack
Tired.
of concentration?
Yeah. All of those. The most important thing is your body kicks into fight and flight mode immediately. And fight and flight mode is when you're super stressed, when you're super anxious, when you're trying to run away from this lion or this tiger. So it kicks into that. Immediately your body tenses up. All your organs are being put under pressure. All of this is tightening. Whatever else is happening for you, your breathing goes faster, your heart rate goes faster, your blood pressure goes up. And then you have emotional symptoms as well. You feel irritable, you feel quickly angered, you might feel exhausted, fatigued, energy drained. There's so much happening because you decided to go through that 20 minutes. Now there's something called the Pomodoro cycle as well, and the Pomodoro cycle is basically saying after every 25 minutes, get up and just move, whether you go and drink a glass of water or just walking around or doing something, and just give yourself that break. Some people prefer that. Some people prefer working on 45-minute slots. What they're saying is you have a 90-minute period where this is your high performance. The ideal would be for those 20 minutes to go and take a nap. Just go and sleep so you can recharge. But we don't have that luxury always, and we don't have that luxury especially in an office. I mean, who's got beds in the office? It's not going to happen. If you can't take that break, or you don't want to nap, or naps don't work for you because you don't sleep at night, just switch from whatever you're doing now to something that's not as intense. Go and make a few phone calls, you know, take that 20 minutes to do your meetings over the phone and get away from your computer. Go for a walk, go and drink water, go and have a snack, do whatever you need to do that's not high performing and using your brain as much. And just take that break every 20 minutes, because if you don't, your fight or flight kicks in. And it's, again, adding to your stress bucket on a daily basis. You don't even recognize it, but it's getting there. I'm sure you've all heard of presenteeism. Basically, you're there, but you're worthless. You're trying to work through, but you're so much slower. You're making mistakes. You can't think clearly. It'd be better for you to take that break and then come back feeling refreshed, renewed, and you can crack on again quickly.
Is it always 90 minutes? Because I find if I'm refreshed, I can actually, like 2.5 hours, and then I find I'm kind of getting a bit slow or not focused.
It is always 90 minutes, exactly the same as your sleep, and you will start recognizing it. But maybe you have a period where you go slower, but it's not affecting you as much until you've done 2 or 3 90 minutes, and the brain is just like, okay, this is too much, and it shuts down. This is where that slump comes in, remember, because we keep pushing. You think you're okay, and then all of a sudden you're like, zoom. From now on, start noticing where you're at. See if you can find those 90 minutes. We will all be on a different 90-minute cycle. But see if you can catch yourself and say, oh, actually now I can feel it. If you want to push through, keep doing it. But obviously, it is going to be that 20 minutes where you work slower and not thinking as clearly. But do test it and see, track it. See if you can track it and write down when you feel that slump. What was the other thing I was going to say to you? Oh, so next up, do you have any questions about this? No? Okay, I'll move on for now. Next up, enhance your quality of sleep. Question for you guys again, on average, how much hours of sleep do you get a night? If you want, you can just show your fingers or talk to me either way. Or maybe I can't.
Seven to 8.
7.
I'm embarrassed to say about 8.5 to 9, but there we go.
Wow.
I'm sure I sleep too much.
Brilliant.
I don't think it is. I don't know. I feel like it's too much. I should be sleeping less. But...
Nope, not necessarily. Sue, how many hours are you getting?
5 to 6.
6.
Yeah, around that.
Ooh. And Rachel, did you tell me yours?
7 to 8.
7 to 8. Okay. So scientists say you need to get 7 to 9 hours sleep a night. Anything more than that and you'll actually be fatigued, and everything less than that, you put your body in stress. So aim for 7 to 9, good quality sleep. As we get older, our sleep will get less as well, simply because, you know, your bladder gets fuller at night, or you have hormonal issues that wake you up because you're hot or something. But wherever you can, try and stick to 7 to 9 hours a night. Again, when I work with the construction guys, on average, they get 6 hours, and the night shift on average gets 4 hours. So, you know, you just can't function on that. Even though Margaret Thatcher said, yes, I can do 4 hours. And yeah, some people can, but most of the time we actually can't. But because we've been doing it for so long, you don't know the difference.
Is it okay if you don't get enough sleep during the week and then make it up at the weekend?
You will never make up sleep.
No.
You never, ever make up sleep. It's lost. So you can sleep for 16 hours on a Saturday, and it will actually just make you feel more tired. This is also why they generally say, whether it's the week or the weekend, always stick to your normal sleep-wake hours. Don't all of a sudden on the weekend sleep longer or sleep less because it's weekend. Get up at the same time, because all of that messes with your system. And again, all of that adds to your stress. It just throws out your hormones. It throws out literally everything in your body because it changes too much. So you, again, that stress, and when you're stressed, you've got high cortisol being pumped in your body. You've got all sorts of physical sensations happening in your body because of that.
But if you're, I mean, part of the weekend, it's everything day is quite similar, working from home, and part of the sort of pleasure psychologically is thinking, oh, it is the weekend, I'll have a glass of wine in the evening, and I don't have to wake up the alarm tomorrow. So I mean, I won't sleep hugely long, but it is part of the pleasure and making a difference between week and weekend.
Yeah, and we all do it.
I think you need to treat yourself and think, oh, that's really nice, don't you? I think it's important.
No, I agree with you. And I mean, I do exactly the same. I don't stick to my normal routine for sleeping. But it is suggested that you do, just because it has such an effect on you. And also, if you think about it, sleep is actually the most important part in your life. Sleep and mental health go hand in hand. If the one's poor, the other one is definitely going to be poor as well. They feed into each other. And sleep is often, sadly, the first thing we give up in favor of something else. I want to watch a movie a little bit longer, so I'm not necessarily going to wake up later tomorrow morning, because some of us have this internal body clock and it still wakes us up at the same time, even though you go back to bed and sleep again, but you've already been woken up, so that interferes with your whole rhythm. If you think about sleep as well, we have, like you've seen the previous image, where is it now, that you've got a cycle. This is obviously not a sleep cycle, but we've all got the cycle that goes through. Now, we go through different phases in the cycle, and every time you'll go into stage 1, 2, 3, and you'll go deeper, deeper, deeper. But if at any stage you wake up in the middle of your entire cycle, so you might have 5 to 7 90-minute cycles a night, but if you wake up at level, say, level 4, you're not just going to fall asleep and continue with your entire cycle. Your cycle starts from scratch. So you'll go down, down, down deeper, and instead of going in and then back out, you go down and then start again and down, and you never actually finish your cycle. So it's so important to get the good quality sleep and enough of it, and in your normal cycle, so that, you know, it just flows with your natural rhythm that your body's used to. Does that all make sense? Yep. Okay. Speak to yourself kindly, because you are always listening. You know, we don't always, you know, I don't know how many of us criticize ourselves, and we're just not good to ourselves. The moment you realize you're not being kind to yourself, stop. Go and do the 4-7-8 breathing, or just count to 10 and just think, hang on a second, what I've just said to myself, am I being kind to myself in saying that? Am I being good to myself? Would I say this to a friend? Actually, if you think, oh, I'm so fat, I'm never going to lose the weight, guess what? You never will, because your mind will just hear fat, 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 never lose the weight, and it says, oh, this is what you want? No problem, I will give it to you. Which is why you need to speak kindly to yourself, you know. Don't criticize yourself, because all of that is adding to your stress. You start to believe these things, which brings me in to recognize that your thoughts are simply just thoughts. They're not truths. Think again about your 85,000 negative thoughts. All of that is going through our minds over and over and over again. We constantly think it, so we cultivate these thoughts. We start to believe it. We start to live by it, which is why we need to be more positive. But it's so important to challenge our thoughts. Like I said, would you say this thought to a friend? Are you being kind to yourself when you're saying it? How important is this thought? Is it going to be important in 6 months' time? You know, stop and really think. I was dealing with a client again this week, and she's extremely depressive and extremely negative. And during our session that we had, in that short time, I've now taught her how to recognize her negative thoughts. And in such a short period, she was like, oh, caught myself, oh, again, and she was constantly catching herself with all these negative thoughts, didn't even realize how many she's got just in the session we were doing. So again, recognize it's just thoughts. You don't have to act on those thoughts. But sometimes a thought will come in our mind, it will trigger something, and immediately you're tensed. And I'll give you another example of another client of mine who had panic attacks. And she says, Ghitta, I've got them 3-4 times a week. Out of the blue, I have no idea where they come from, and I just don't have a normal life. She said she'll be driving in the car and all of a sudden have a panic attack, have to go off the road and literally lie down on the pavement trying to breathe and calm herself again. And her kids are watching it. She's got a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old, and she doesn't know how to explain this. And I said, okay, so where is this coming from? Why do you have this? She's like, I have no idea. I think I'm worried if I die, no one's going to look after my kids. And I said to her, you might think that, but I don't think that's the real reason why you've got these anxiety attacks. So we did a session, and it turns out, well, if I backtrack a little bit, what I do in my sessions, I do regression. So I take them back to the very first time in their lives where they felt these symptoms, when they felt really stressed, breathing faster, sweating all over, can't breathe properly, and they're panicking. So where does this lead to? And it turns out she was 10 years old in a castle, and the castle was stuffy. There was tons of people there, really, really busy. And she was pulling at her mom's arm and said, Mom, I need out. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. And she felt really like squished in. And the mom said, well, we're just going to have to follow this route of the castle. We can't just walk back. You have to follow the route and get out. And it was excruciating for her as a 10-year-old having to go through that. And that planted the first stressful memory. And then what's happened in the meantime was, which her mind recognized, every time she feels hot, she gets a flush. She's not in menopause, but she gets a hot flush basically. So she starts sweating on her upper lip. She feels really warm. She looks to see, is there a window that's open? She notices a window's closed, and she gets a panic attack every time. If she looks and sees the window's open, she doesn't have a panic attack. And that was a small thing for her that she couldn't even pinpoint, but it was causing her so much stress and anxiety, and she had nowhere to go, nowhere to turn to. Doctors said, well, we'll give you pills, and she's like, but I don't want pills. I just want to be better, and they couldn't help her. I did one session, we found that out, and she's like, Ghitta, now I just keep the window open all the time, and she's fine. Absolutely. So, and it's merely a thought. She looks, the window's closed, and instantly she gets that panic from a thought. And this is why we tend to believe our thoughts. We think the window's closed, I can't breathe. It's not the case, but that's how we've programmed our minds over and over and over throughout the years. Any questions before we go on? Nope? Okay. Next up, we're nearly done. We started a bit late, but we're almost done. Okay, so you don't have to do everything right now. Don't try and fill up your everyday with doing stuff constantly, you know, having mental little notes and tasks for yourself and doing something all the time is just going to drive you nuts. Take breaks. Have your 20-minute breaks in your 90 minutes. Go and walk away and do your 4, 7, 8 breathing. Go and walk a lap around the block and just make sure you take time for yourself, good things, you know, and sometimes just sit and have your glass of wine without thinking or worrying about anything else. Slow down. And I guess this more applies for when we were in the rat race and traveling and going this way and that way and rush in the office, you know, just stop, take a deep breath or do the 4, 7, 8 and slow yourself down. Release judgment. Again, how often are you judging yourself? How often are you aware that you're judging yourself? Create that awareness in your mind so that you can stop it, because again, that will cause you stress. And I'd like you each to make one health-related commitment, you know, even as simple as drinking less coffee, doing a little bit more exercise. I literally, where are we now? 3 days ago, I scratched up by chance my Fitbit in my cupboard. I haven't worn it since 2017 was the last time I wore it. I scratched it out and I thought, oh, well, that's not really good, because when I last wore it, I was actually working in an office and I was doing 18,000 steps a day. Now, sitting at home, what's the chances I'll do it? But I set myself a target to do 5,000 steps a day. I'd love to do 10,000, but I'm not quite sure how that's going to happen working from home. But yeah, so now since Wednesday, I am hitting my target at 5,000 steps a day. And that's just one small thing that I thought, you know what, I'm going to do it. And I did it. Literally the day I saw it, I decided it and I did it. So pick one thing for you that you can commit to today. And it might be one of these things on this list as well, you know, just to make that change in your life. I made a note here, but I can't remember it off by heart. So for instance, cutting back on caffeine consumption can have a positive effect. Studies show that without caffeine, people reported feeling more relaxed, less jittery or nervous, slept better, had more energy, and experienced less heartburn and fewer muscle aches. You know, that's just from coffee. I'm not saying you need to cut out your coffee at all. I don't drink coffee though, but some people are quite addicted to their coffee. They need their morning cup. But find something that works for you that you think will actually give you a little bit, that tap in the bucket. What's going to be that release for you? Next up, tap into your support system. My advice would be have a list of 5 people, 5 friends in your life that you feel you can talk to. Not necessarily talking to all 5 of them about the same thing, but 5 people that are just there for you, so that if you're really stressed or you're really down and you can't think clearly, you don't have to think. You've got your list of 5 friends and just call through. And if the one doesn't answer, you've got the next one, you've got the next one. I went through a really bad time earlier this year and I couldn't even think, besides from my husband, I couldn't really think of anyone that I could call. I just couldn't. And I was scrolling through my phone but not really even recognizing names. And afterwards I thought, gosh, I could have phoned this person and this person. And I just couldn't think of anything or anyone I could have dialed at that stage. So make it easy on yourself. Have that 5 people on a list or in your wallet or on your phone somewhere where you can just tap into that support system. Set limits, you know, if things are getting too much, say no. even if it's for social commitments sometimes, you know, push back and just say, I can't do it at this stage, because you don't want to be adding to your stress that you're already going through. Speak to your manager and say, look, it's just too much responsibility for me at this stage. I need a little bit of a timeout. Can we delegate? Or is there something that is, you know, priority? Work through it with me so I know this is what I have to do, and the rest I can do as and when I've got that energy, instead of just trying to do everything at the same time. Strive for a positive outlook. Again, like we mentioned before, you've got to create that positive outlook. You've got to create that mindset, and look at your perceptions. Always try and perceive things from someone else's view. Lastly is seek additional help. I don't have it on the slide now, unfortunately, but I have a scale of 0 to 10, 0 being nothing bothers me, and 10 is like I am a complete burnout, complete mess, complete anxious, can't do anything for myself anymore. And the scale lets you look at everything, and you just track yourself every day, almost like that stress test you did, and just see where you're at. You know, are you at a 3? Are you at a 7? How are you doing on a daily basis? Most of the time, when you get to level 5 or 6, you already need to seek help from a therapist. But by the time I see people, they are at an 8 or a 9 or a 10. And it's so hard for me, never mind for them, to get them back down from an 8 to a 2 or a 3. It's so much work. If you had professional help at a 5 or a 6 level already, you'd be out of there in no time again and get back to it. Some people wait just too long. They think, oh, I'll just do one more thing, and that's when that bucket explodes or overflows or whatever you might want to think about it. So don't be shy or ashamed or anything in seeking professional help. Get the help you need. Don't leave it too long. And I guess that is it. That is me, guys. I'll move that there, wherever. Where should I move it to? So I don't know if you have any questions for me.
Has anybody got any questions?
No questions.
One general thing, would you ever talk to your boss mention about if it's too much in delegation or scheduling? But would you ever, I mean, I think it's natural. I worked through the beginnings and didn't realise sort of COVID is a machismo. You've got to be doing everything and be able to cope. Would you ever recommend talking to your boss about feeling stressed, per se? Because it's very much a sort of sign of weakness. You know, you're supposed to be able to do everything.
Lots of people think that, sadly, and sometimes you have a boss that's not very open-minded, which is what I'm trying to do with corporate clients, get them to understand it's necessary. If you're not going to speak to your boss, think about it this way. You will deteriorate because you can't take everything on by yourself. Things are going to get worse and worse and worse. You'll make more mistakes. You'll be unfocused. You will be a changed person. You wouldn't be the bubbly self you normally are. You'll be miserable. You'll be irritable. You'll be snappy. Everything's just going to go downhill because you are struggling. And sometimes people see that and they think, oh, well, this person's just miserable. I'll ignore them. And meantime, you're almost crying out for help. Now, if you're going to go on trying to do everything yourself, you're going to lack in your normal capability of what you normally produce, you know, your productivity, everything else. So it's actually in your and your boss's and the company's best interest to say, I need a timeout. I need a mental health day. I need support. Whatever it is, you would know already what you need. Maybe you just need to work, you know, less hours for the time being until you can get yourself back up at the high energy hours so that you can really work hard and focus on all your work. Remember, I mentioned presentism earlier on. If you're just going to keep pushing yourself, you'll just be present, but be worthless, really. So you're spending 20 hours trying to fix one problem, and you could have really done it in 2 hours, but you keep on pushing. So yes, I would highly recommend always going to speak to your manager. If you don't feel comfortable speaking to them, speak to HR and just say, look, I'm going through a hard time. I understand, throw them, give them the stress bucket method and say, I understand some people can handle a lot of stress, but my stress bucket is really small. I'm up to my limits, and I just need help or support or time out, or can we sit and re-look at all the things I need to do, all your responsibilities, and prioritize them and work with your manager. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, Teresa, do you want to turn the record off for us?